David had always wondered why his kitchen floor was colder than the rest of the house. One day, while fixing a leaky faucet, he noticed a loose floorboard and decided to investigate. To his surprise, he found a hidden room under his kitchen that looked like it had been untouched for years. David's curiosity got the better of him and he descended the stairs, ready to explore. David slowly descended the stairs, his heart pounding with every step he took. As he reached the bottom, he shone his light around the room and was amazed by what he saw. So the room was small and dusty, filled with old furniture covered in cobwebs. But there was something very odd about this room. A layer of dust covered the room, well, almost, because at some spots the dust was brushed away. At first, David thought mice or rats could have done that, but then he started to hear noises coming from upstairs. There was someone in his kitchen. David rushed to the stairs, but it was too late. David saw a shadowy figure move through his kitchen, and they quickly placed the floorboards back on David's kitchen floor, trapping him in the dusty dark room underground. But why was there a secret room underneath David's kitchen? Who trapped him in there? And will he get out? Before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. David had always felt a strange chill beneath his feet whenever he entered the kitchen of his small cottage. The floors of the other rooms felt warm and comforting, but in the kitchen, his toes were always met with a cold and clammy sensation. One day, while washing his dishes, David heard a faint creaking noise coming from the ground. He stopped what he was doing and listened, trying to locate the source of the sound. He noticed a loose floorboard. He stepped on it a few times to loosen it up a little more and to think about what he should do with it. He knelt down and pried the loose board off. David peered underneath his floorboards and saw a set of stairs leading down into darkness. His heart began to race with excitement and fear as he realized that he had discovered a hidden room under his kitchen. There had been no information about a hidden room when he bought the house years ago. He had looked at the ground plan before buying the place, and there was nothing like this on there. Otherwise, he would have definitely remembered it. David stared at the stairs and suddenly felt very curious. So after thinking for a few minutes, David grabbed a flashlight and carefully descended the stairs, his curiosity getting the better of him. As he reached the bottom, he shone his light around the pitch-black room and was amazed by what he saw. The room was small and dusty, filled with old furniture covered in cobwebs. A layer of dust covered everything, indicating that it hadn't been touched in years, or so he thought. He slowly shuffled around the room, scared to step on something he'd rather not step on. His eyes adjusted to the darkness, and he shone his flashlight carefully around the realm. As he explored the room further, David noticed something strange. As he looked around the room, he noticed not everything was covered in dust. At first, he thought maybe mice or rats had brushed the dust away, but among the little animal paw prints, he also noticed marks he couldn't quite place. The markings were way too big to come from a rodent. They almost looked human-like with 5 little toes. David's heart began to race as he realized he might not be alone. David also noticed a stack of books and a half-eaten sandwich. Someone had been living down here, and it was clear that they weren't a mere intruder. Suddenly, he heard the floorboards upstairs creak. He looked up the stairs and saw a shadowy figure moving around. But just as he was about to run up the stairs, something happened. The shadowy figure upstairs quickly placed the floorboards back, trapping David in the dusty room downstairs. David was in complete shock. How will he get out of this room? He shouted to be freed, but no one heard him. Then survival mode kicked in. David figured there had to be a way out. David took a deep breath in and turned on his flashlight. Then he started to make his way through the small and narrow tunnel. The thought of someone living inside his house at the same time as him, without ever being seen, scared the shit out of David. Then finally he saw a light at the end of the tunnel. He had made it out, but had no idea where he was. The entrance of the tunnel was out in the open, but not for long. Before returning to his house, David made sure no one could go in or out of the tunnel anymore. This way, he trapped the person inside his house without him knowing. David hoped the person would flee through the tunnel, not realizing there was no way out. But it wasn't that easy. First, David had to find his way back to his house. He thought it couldn't be that far, as the tunnel wasn't super long. He walked along what he thought was the tunnel and eventually saw his house through the dense trees. He stopped for a second and saw movement inside his living room. Someone was inside his house. David thought about what he should do next. His home was somewhat far from any police station, so it would take a long time for them to get there, and he didn't want to wait outside in the cold for so long. So he decided to take matters into his own hands. He thought of a plan to capture the mystery intruder, but he wasn't in a great position. David sneaked toward his house, trying not to be seen by the person inside. It could easily go both ways, so David had to be prepared. He looked around for a weapon of some sort and found a big stick. With the stick in his hand, he sneaked toward the front door. Luckily for him, the door was unlocked. Then he carefully creaked open the door and looked inside his house. The hallway was empty, but he saw muddy footprints covering his floor. David carefully walked through his hallway toward his kitchen. As he peeked inside the kitchen, he saw the intruder standing with his back toward David. He was making himself a sandwich with David's freshly bought bread. The intruder froze, probably scared to move. "So who are you, and what are you doing in my kitchen?" David sternly asked. I can explain. Turn around," David said. But the intruder didn't move. "Turn around," he yelled again, but still no movement. He got a feeling the intruder wasn't as dangerous as he thought, but he was wrong. It was as if the intruder could sense David had lowered his stick, because as soon as he did, the intruder took a run for it. He spun around and sped past David. David, who didn't expect this at all, was too slow and couldn't grab the intruder as he barged past him. David immediately sprinted past the intruder, but he had no idea where he had gone. David stood in the doorway and looked out of his front door. He looked for a few more minutes and thought he saw something moving behind the trees. "Yeah, you better run and never come back," he yelled at what he thought was the man. He felt relieved and glad he could scare the man away without a fight, so he confidently headed back inside. David walked over to his living room to see what the intruder had done when he was alone in the house. The couch was dirty and the TV was on. Footprints covered his floor, making it easy to track where the intruder had walked. Luckily, he saw no footprints leading up the stairs. No one was there. He was sure he had heard noises from inside this room. He checked behind the counter and in some of the cabinets, but the room was really empty. But he listened again and heard the sound coming from beneath him. Could the intruder have gone downstairs again? He wouldn't be that stupid, right? David chuckled as he realized he had trapped the intruder downstairs without even trying. He quickly placed a heavy chair on the hatch and called the police. He explained to the police what had happened, and they told him to sit tight and wait. But that wasn't in David's character. He wondered who it was living underneath his house, and he had no patience. So he ran back to the entrance of the tunnel and slipped inside. He crawled through the tunnel and quickly reached the secret room. David swung open the cabinet door and jumped out of the tunnel, scaring the intruder. The intruder yelled and begged David not to hurt him. He sounded really scared, and David almost felt sorry for him. He wanted to scare him, but not to such an extent. The intruder stood in front of him with his hands up in the air. "Please don't shoot me, sir," he yelled. Did he think David was the police? David, who could now clearly see what the intruder looked like, noticed how defeated he looked. The man was dirty, barefooted, and wore ripped-up clothing. David asked the man why he lived there and how he even discovered this place, and his response was truly shocking. The man told David he had been wandering around the forest looking for a place to sleep. Fortunately, he was homeless, and it was raining, so he searched for a dry spot. That's when he noticed it. The tunnel. It was covered in leaves and branches, almost impossible to spot. At first, the homeless man thought it was a hollow tree, so he sat near the entrance for a while. But after a while, he noticed how long the tree had to be, so he decided to crawl a bit further. The tunnel. He crawled through and stumbled upon this room. For the homeless man, it was like a sign from above, and since then he had been living there. A few minutes later, the police arrived, and they arrested the man for trespassing. A few minutes later, David could hear the sirens coming closer. The man looked up with fear in his eyes. He was scared to be hurt by the police, but David was able to calm him down. He assured the man the police wouldn't hurt him, and that he at least had a place to sleep for tonight. David left the homeless man to guide the police in his direction. He waited by the entrance of the tunnel and waved to the police to come in his direction. He told the police that the man was confused and harmless, so they had no reason to be aggressive toward him. In seconds, the secret room was swarmed with police officers. They inspected the room and took the homeless man into custody. They asked David if he wanted to press charges, but David didn't want to cause the man more trouble. He just wanted him to get the help he needed. A few hours later, David was alone again. He stood in his secret room and looked around. He sighed and decided to crawl out through the tunnel so he could close it up again. He filled the tunnel with sand from the beginning of his secret room until the entrance. No one could ever come in that way ever again. After that, he spent his days cleaning out the secret room and turning it into something he had always wanted, his very own man cave. So he had always dreamt of owning a man cave and had many ideas for it. He eventually chose to carpet the floors, renew the stairs, and even install a huge flat-screen TV. He had no wife to get away from yet, but he knew he would spend a lot of time inside this new room. He also renewed the hatch so it was easier to open. As for the homeless man, David stayed in contact with him to ensure he was treated fairly, and he arranged for him to stay at a homeless shelter. The man was grateful for David's mercy and vowed to better himself. But the homeless man named Greg eventually got a job and saved enough money to rent his own place. No one ever broke into David's house again, and he eventually started to feel safe again. He never forgot about the man living underneath his house without him knowing and was grateful for the things that came from it.